A topic that can be a bit uh, discussed could be called the problem of pain, the problem of suffering. In various, for example, philosophical traditions, that is a problem that has been discussed for a very long time. One broad approach would have it that uh, the presence of suffering in the world precludes the possibility of there being any sort of, let's say, rational, intelligible order. Right? There is then no possibility of, say, a transcendent good such as human beings can aspire for, because there is simply too much pain and suffering in the world. The quote unquote universe then is not quote unquote benevolent. It is not looking out for human beings and their interests and their possibilities of happiness. We are just accidental byproducts of impersonal natural forces. And then, of course, that certainly explains the presence of much pain. Now, on the flip side, or on the other side, there have been numerous attempts to try to salvage or preserve a conception of things such that would situate values in the universe, right, and make them a permanent and true part of reality, right? Meaning that values, for example, traditional ones such as truth and goodness and beauty and love and hope and all that, are not simply kind of artificially superimposed, are not the byproducts of our fancies, but are somehow an integral, organic part of the whole, of which human beings as well are a part. So let's try to offer some tentative insights concerning these matters and see where they could take us. One thing that could be useful would be to clarify just what is meant by suffering and then to think about perhaps the types of suffering and how they might arise. What are some obvious such examples? One kind of suffering is physical pain. Right? For example, keeping things nice and light, I stubbed my toe. I got a paper cut. I have a stomach ache. I have a migraine. And of course, things can go on unbelievably and inordinately from there. Another form of suffering is emotional suffering. I sustained some loss. Somebody hurt my feelings. I Something didn't go my way. Something along those lines, and I feel really bad. I am suffering emotionally. I'm depressed. I'm anxious, and so forth. Now we can ask, what do both those types of suffering, again, thought of in the broadest way that we can think of them, what do they have in common? What they have in common appears to be that they involve contradictions of, say, active agendas. In other words, desires. So, for example, I have a desire to have a successful business, and my business is not successful. That will bring me emotional suffering, and it can also encroach onto the physical aspect and lead to migraines and all kinds of things, sleepless nights, which lead to other things. But starting with, let's say, emotional suffering. Right? I wanted my sports team to win, and they lost. That can bring me emotional suffering. Well, it's because I wanted my sports team to win. And I lost my pet, again, keeping it nice and light. I lost my pet goldfish, and that can bring me quite a bit of suffering because it was my pet goldfish and I wanted to have it. Right now, that logic then can be extended to physical suffering. Even though we may be entirely ignorant of what is going on, so to say, behind the scenes, when we investigate, we can kind of gain some gleans, some hints as to what is going on. For example, it happens to be the fact that we need to breathe in order to live. And what do you know? If we hold our breath, suffering shortly will ensue. it happens to be the fact that we need to eat in order to live. And what do you know? If we withhold food for long enough, pain in the stomach, for instance, and so forth, begins. And just so for other aspects of the anatomy. Presumably, there's a latent desire to have unbroken skin. So there's a paper cut that is interpreted as pain. So we say basically that reason indicates, logic indicates that at the back of physical pain must need be a desire to have an anatomical form such as it is. To have unbroken skin, for example, to have oxygen, to have oxygenated, blood, and so forth and so on. And when those objectives, when those presumably active, even if unconscious desires are contradicted, that tends to be interpreted as pain and as suffering. Now, so far as that is the case, meaning that pain and suffering comes about when active desires are contradicted, we can make sense of what otherwise might be a disturbing fact, which is that virtually everything that ever has happened or is happening does not bring me suffering, whoever it is that I am. Even though I can imagine how it could bring many other people or many other creatures very much suffering. Right, so even though, for example, I can grant intellectually that every day, whatever the statistics say, a certain quantity, a huge quantity presumably of people die, and a certain quantity of homes are lost in fires, and a certain number of businesses bust, and a certain amount of say sports teams lose, and so forth and so on. None of that is any of my concern. I either don't know about it, or even if I theoretically know about it, it doesn't bother me. If I try to, or if it does bother me, it's because I'm making it bother me. I am a very peaceful person, and I heard of the war, and it's really bothering me. But I can forget about it. I cannot read the news. It's not going to bother me. I can try to form some dim conception of the unbelievable amount of loss and pain that must have occurred historically. It's inconceivable, obviously, but just to even just say it in words, it's mind blowing. All of the flesh eating diseases that there have been, all of the tortures, all the people lost in war, but it's nothing to me. What is something to me is that which I know about and which implicates an active desire of mine, be it anatomical, I want to breathe and I want to eat, or be it something else. I want to have a home and I want to have a clean home and I want to have a certain amount of money in the bank and so forth. So there's probably a number of pathways forward concerning our question to illuminate the problem of suffering a little bit. One thing that could be asked is, what is the nature of desire? And we can see where that takes us. So, let's say that I have a desire to have a clean home. How did that desire come about? Well, the first thing is that I need to know of my home. It needs to become a discrete, meaning an individual reality in my mind. Let's say initially I'm home shopping. Right now, let's imagine I don't have any home. I'm in the motel. I just have this one concept: homes. That's it. Right now, I look here and I look there, and finally I find a particular place. And then it begins to stand out to me. That's a specific home. It's on this street. Right? This is the address. This is what it looks like. I find out about it, and then I kind of say, okay, now this is my home. Right? And then I can begin to have desires concerning it. Now, what does it mean to make it my home? Presumably, it means that I have either taken it into my sense of self or expanded my sense of self to encompass it, however we would kind of construe things here. Ultimately, the home has to be, so to say, in me for it to be mine. It has to become a part of me. If I'm just standing next to the home, it's not mine, right? If I'm just touching it, that doesn't make it mine. Even if I sign some contract and some paperwork and then I forget about that paperwork, or it means nothing to me, I don't understand what happened, it's still not mine from my point of view. It's mine when it has kind of become a part of me. Now that it has become a part of me, I wish it to be doing well, so to say. I am meaning I want my home to obviously not go up in flames, maybe be spared. I want the roof to not leak, and I would also have it be clean, and so forth. Now, why would that be? I so here we can kind of ask ourselves, what do all of our desires have in common? And one interpretation would have it that what it has in common is that we cogitate, meaning conceive, understand what the object of our desire, what the object that we have taken into ourself would be like, would it be brought to some kind of ultimate? Right? In theory, in principle, the ultimate home, what would that be like? The ultimate bank account, what would that be like? The ultimate sports team, what would that be like? The ultimate body and face, what would that be like? The ultimate success, what would that be like? Right, so we have this kind of notion in mind, and then we construe all that which moves us towards that notion as positive, good, right? And all that which nullifies that notion or makes us feel that we're moving away from it as negative. So, for example, I feel like I'm taking a step towards the ultimate body because I've lost a little weight or gained a little bit of muscle. Good, pleasure. I feel like I'm being moved away from that. Pain. I feel like I'm taking a step towards the ultimate home because my home is nice and clean and the roof does not leak and so forth. Pleasure. Feels good. I feel like I'm being taken away from that. The roof is leaking and the home is dirty. Bad. No good. I feel like my career or my job offers me indefinite potentialities. I just got promoted and I might get promoted again. Awesome. Feels great. I feel like it's a dead end. Doesn't feel good. All right, so the next question then to ask would seem to be, where do we get these fancies? How come? I excuse me, even know of this dog before yesterday, and now I know of it. I adopted it from the shelter, and now the dog dying would bring me tremendous pain. I want the dog, in theory, to live forever. I want it to be the ultimate pet. I didn't even know of this sports team before some time. At least when I was a little kid, maybe I didn't know about it. And now I want it to always win, to be the super champions. How? Why? So somewhere we get this impetus, we get these attributes, we get these qualities, and apparently we're pasting them, we're applying them onto whatever it is that we bring into our sense of self. We get the idea? I bring the dog into my sense of self. Let the dog live forever, be the ultimate pet. I bring the person even into my sense of self, the romantic partner. Let him or her be, should we say, not it, be the ultimate romantic partner and bring me supreme happiness and joy and satisfaction. I bring the job, the career into my sense of self. Let it be the ultimate job, the ultimate career. I bring the bank account into my sense of self. Let it be the ultimate bank account with the most money possible. We get the idea. So somewhere we're getting these ideas and we're applying it onto whatever it is that we think that we are. I am in part my bank account. I am in part my home. I am in part my dog, or those things are in me again, however we would parse things up. And now I'm applying those claims concerning infinity and absoluteness and eternity and perfection and such onto myself, conceived, construed, thought of in these terms. You get the idea? So the question then would be again, where do these fancies come from? And here the only answer that seems sensible or even possible would seem to be from kind of one's own innermost nature. Taking a quite simple and self-evident example, each individual is only him or herself and has only a first person point of view. As myself, I'm a center. So now I take that centrality, which is a quality of myself as a subject, as a thinking, perceiving, feeling sort of being or whatnot, and then I apply it to whatever it is that I think that I am. Again, I'm central as a subject. I'm a first person point of view. And now I've become, in part, my sports team, and I would have it also be central and also be number one and also be the center. I've taken into my sense of self my job. my position in society, and I would have it be the central position. Maybe that's why we have so much fascination with these superpositions, the prime minister, the president, right? Because it seems to conform to that. I've taken into my sense of self an identity as a celebrity. Right? And now I would have that, or I would have myself as the celebrity be the celebrity, the central celebrity, the main celebrity. We get the idea? So that's just one example. Who's to say what the depths there are of one's selfhood and how all that works out, but just to gain some idea of it. So basically, to keep things to the point, we're inquiring about the problem of pain, the question of suffering. It seems that suffering comes about when active desires are contradicted. Desires seem to be instances wherein the terms in which we construe ourselves are aggrandized to infinity, and then we note when those terms are contradicted and when they are not, and when they are promoted. Again, not to be too repetitive, but just to make sure we understand, the terms I conceive myself in begin with my anatomy. I would have myself live forever. I would have myself be youthful forever, for example, to be the most beautiful, to be the healthiest and the strongest. If I feel like I'm taking a step in that direction, good. I feel like I'm taking a step away from that direction, bad. Right, so, in short, it would seem then that suffering is, again, a byproduct of attempting to, should we say, first of all, emotional suffering, attempting to attain to, let's say, the infinite from the finite, attempting to attain perfection and absoluteness from that which can never be perfect and that which can never be absolute. Uh, why should it disappoint me, right? To be perfectly frank, that my dog died. Right? There's many dogs in the world. There's many animals in the world. Well, it's because I've taken the dog into my sense of self. I apply those claims of absoluteness onto my dog. My dog needs to live forever and be the perfect pet. Why should it bring me emotional suffering that my standing in society is not as high as him, her, the other? Well, because I have this concept, myself in the society, my job, my place of living, this and that, and I would have it be ultimate. I would have it be everything, and it's not, and it brings me suffering. Now, that's as it concerns the emotional suffering. Physical suffering, in principle, appears to be the same idea. The same logic, in principle, appears to apply to physical suffering. And we see that supported by, for example, the fact that it is possible, in theory, to reinterpret signals that are something is awry, something is off with our body, and reinterpret them and not perceive them as pain. Maybe I'm so focused on the game if I'm an athlete, on the battle if I'm a soldier, even a great injury may be spared. It is not perceived as pain. And with special training, also there seem to be there in some possibilities. Right? A person can lose their limb and still feel pain in that limb. It's called phantom limbs or phantom pain, whatever the terminology is. So again, the idea seems to be the same. I think something will help me also. I think this medicine will help me, and it does. I think this will hurt me, and it doesn't. It seems to be the same, but it must be admitted that the volition there, the latitude of volition is limited, meaning it will still hurt, presumably, almost whatever I do, if not whatever I do, to withhold breath past a certain point, to starve oneself, and so forth. But basically, to again get back to the main problem, pain appears to be a logically necessary byproduct of um, reality being constituted as it is. To the point, or so far as I am confined, my sense of self is limited to a given anatomy. I will suffer and enjoy in light of the weal and the woe, meaning the affairs of that anatomy. Right? If we consider animals, we might imagine that the majority of their suffering comes from when their anatomy is not doing as well as it could be doing, and the majority of their pleasure comes from when the needs of the anatomy are satisfied. Obviously, higher animals have social needs and this and that, but essentially, right now, can a world be construed such as does not involve that problem? Uh, Maybe if everybody is a herbivore, right? But as it happens, animals feed on each other, and the contradiction of the active desires associated with anatomies such as our Eden shall amount to, far as we infer, unpleasant experiences. But they pass, and it is what it is. Right? Let's say that a gazelle got its throat ripped out, to be a little bit blunt, last year. Right now, the gazelle obviously is long since passed away. How does that pain still exist? How does that suffering still exist? We can't say that it exists in any which way. It was strictly tied down to that anatomy. It passes. It's momentary. In the moment, it's not pleasant. A kind person would not wish it upon any creature, but it is what it is. And to say that, therefore, the universe is evil, quote unquote, because of this dynamic, doesn't seem reasonable at all. Further pain can be added up. We can't take the pain that we infer must have arisen in connection with every gazelle that has ever been killed by a predatory cat and add it up to have some kind of big sum of pain. That's in our imagination. Oh, imagine all the animals that are suffering. Experiences appear to be individual. There's only that individual amount of pain in individual experience. And so far as it is tied to the anatomy, it is limited and it shall pass as bad as it is at the moment. And once it passes, it's gone, and that is that. Now, emotional pain might be thought of as a little bit more complicated, but here we see that we can judge kind of the ideals of human life or the possibilities of human life and the potential for the realization of value in the universe, so to say, by the highest examples of human beings, not necessarily by the average or by the below average. If we take a look at individuals that progress properly in the ethical and intellectual connotations, we see that a person progressively kind of outgrows and outmatures their narrow, limited, egocentric, so to say, self-centered sense of self, such the provocation of which and such the contradictions of the desires of which is most liable to bring an individual pain and suffering. While I am within the orbit of my narrow psychophysical animal individuality, there's so many opportunities for suffering and for pain. Somebody slighted me, somebody insulted me, that's different. Somebody ignored me, I got passed over for a promotion or some kind of opportunity. I think I'm not the most beautiful, I think I'm not the best, I have a pimple, I'm not tall enough, I'm too tall, I'm too large, I'm too small, my nose is too big, it's too narrow. I have too much money, I have not enough money, my family is the best, is not the best, is, well, maybe if it is the best, no, it's not the best. We get the idea. There's so many sources of suffering, right? With the ultimate such source being perhaps the subtle self-consciousness that the Homo sapien has, that he or she is meant for something more, and yet is tied down to this vulgar, imbruted condition, akin to the rest of the animals. But if we exercise our freedom correctly, meaning we're honest and we're true, and we consequently progress our individuality properly, we should outgrow that in time. And consequently, such suffering as comes about because of self-centeredness, because of our inner evil, it should also no longer trouble us. And physical suffering, again, is what it is, but it passes, and then that's that. So, here too, we will not seem to have an opening to condemn the whole existential scheme, meaning to say, because there is emotional, to use that term, suffering, therefore everything is evil, and there must be no intrinsic values organic to the universe. Again, to use that term to mean just the entirety of the extent of that which exists. There doesn't seem to be grounds for that. If we do what we need to do when we need to do it, if we're honest, if we're true, we should hopefully mature and develop to where, again, the self-centered sorts of suffering decrease. Other suffering can be certainly constructive, and when we properly tangle with the issues of life and with ourself, that can certainly lead to suffering. But that's sort of constructive suffering. For example, I feel bad for all the bad things I did, and that's going to motivate me, hopefully, to right my wrongs and to do right by other people. That's a good sort of suffering. Nobody should complain about that kind of suffering. The self centered suffering should go away if we properly use our freedom and we properly mature. The physical suffering is an inevitable kind of concomitant of discrete, meaning individual anatomies, situated as they are in the natural scheme in need of certain elements like food and oxygen. It's the flip side of the coin, the other side of which is pleasure. Right? As good as it feels to take a nice deep breath, it feels very bad to not breathe. As good as it feels to eat a nice meal, it can feel very bad to not eat at least for too long. As good as it can feel to maybe take a hot shower. If it's too hot, that can feel very bad. It can feel great to take a cool shower on a hot day. If it's too cold, it can begin to feel bad. Those are two sides of the same coin. There doesn't seem to be any scheme conceivable where that is not so, right, to create simply anesthetized anatomies such that don't feel anything. That in itself would be a great evil, as we can see in cases where people cannot feel pain, let's say from infanthood, where I can, as a baby, goodness forbid, crawl into a fire, not feel anything, right, or get burnt or something like this. That's an evil, right? The fact that our body gives us indications of when the objectives pertinent to it are contradicted, and that we interpret those signals in a way that is not pleasant, that again seems to be necessary and altogether desirable. So, in short, we asked as to the problem of pain, the problem of suffering. Does the existence of suffering in the world indicate that the world is ultimately evil, or that there is no organic place for humankind in the economy of things, in the existential economy, meaning not the financial economy, the economy of all things altogether? Are values simply superimposed? Can they not really have a place in reality since there is so much pain and suffering? We proceeded to analyze the nature of pain and of suffering. And the tentative proposition is that no, the presence of pain and suffering does not indicate that reality is ultimately evil and that values ultimately have no true footing in reality. So, hopefully, as tentative as those suggestions were, they can give us some food for thought and we can think about it. Thank you for listening.